The order is going to be case on China, and then power grids, and then the K. Can you repeat that, please? Case on China and power grid, or domestic, and then the K. Okay, ready? They say that the China trade war over REs is not unique, but they don't take into account our Shimatsu evidence, which is from 2012, which says that we are currently on the brink because they're acting as a cartel. It doesn't account for the fact that China controls 97% of the supply of REs, which means that they have a natural monopoly over this. Any sort of alternate causality or argument about what Japan is going to do doesn't make sense. If a country owns 97% of the materials, they automatically have a monopoly on it, and that's going to trigger a trade war. And if they say that it's not unique and a trade war would have already been triggered, then that proves the point that trade wars are hard to trigger with China, and that there is a extremely high limit for us actually going to war with them, which is just going to mitigate all the likelihood of all of their impacts, just because they're trying to change their regime and look to that type of economy. They were also trying to do our evidence accounts for the fact that they were also trying to do this. We had that they were also trying to do this with REs, and it failed. It says that they were the first shots in an economic war, and they had a competitive advantage. This was what China centered their economy around. So just because they centered their economy around something, it's empirically proven that it doesn't necessarily trigger a trade war. And China trade war now dwindling the supplies, we cut off China's supplies, this escalates to price shocks from REs are going to cause a full-scale war with China. Cohen 7. Stocks of silver metals appearing adequate to sustain the developed world when resources run short, conflict is not far behind. The key motives of civil war in DRC was the country's mineral resources, the world coincided surged by mobile phones to China, cut off the supply that would create a big conflict. So that means that either A, trade wars don't happen with China, we've already empirically seen this, or B, we already have a big war over REs, so it's not unique. And let's go to the domestic energy advantage. So their internal link is through the bouncing of natural gas prices, which is not going to allow us to sustain the energy grid, but natural gas prices becoming stable pricing tools already ensure growth for the next years. That is 9.7. From the CEO of the leading pure natural gas producers, operated volumes of over 3% of U.S. total natural gas supply with regard to natural U.S. gas production and the world continent. As I look in the future, generally I think production is going to stubbornly stay high for the next 12 to 18 months. I don't see much dip in the production. It's starting to flatten out. I would say pretty much flat for a while before you see it actually flip over. As you go into 2014, there's already begun significant decisions made, especially on the gas plants versus coal plants. You're going to start seeing demand come in the gas-fired side. So I can see steaming demand in 2004. These will start coming on about the 2-year lag, so will start coming on the end of 2013 to 2014. These decisions have already been made, so long as production flattened out a little bit. By the time you get in 2014, we'll start getting it supply and demand back together, and we'll definitely add too many rigs if it starts approaching $5 or above. So I think the $4, $5, we will work hard in the mid $4 a couple of years out hedging. This means that the supply is already stable for the next 2 years. We already have this at $4, which means that the spikes that lead to the internal links of the power grid collapse don't matter because we already have a stable natural gas supply, and there's plenty of supply of natural gas. The more we consume, the more we have. Mueller 12. By 2010, the reserves had increased about 300 TCF. In 2011, just 1 year later, the U.S. Energy Information Administration had estimated the reserves to be 862 TCF. Experts believe that the actual number is closer to 3,000. The more you consume, the more you have. This means that there is no risk of a power grid failure because A, we have stable prices for natural gas, and B, we have plenty of it. So that acts as terminal defense on their impact. And on power grid failure, first off, you can extend our argument that the power grid is already pretty terrible. It's going to fail regardless of whether or not we have an energy supply because it's poorly made. This is a separate internal warrant, which is that because the power grid is poor, it doesn't matter if we're pouring energy into it. If it's poorly made, it's going to fail. And terrorists are motivated to attack the energy grid because they know it's vulnerable. Security experts agree near at 07. The power system is tempting target because energy is a large part of the U.S. economy. Interconnected its openness and location made our system vulnerable to terrorists attack the World Trade Center. Our power network presents many of the same vulnerabilities. Terrorist groups expect interest in exploiting vulnerabilities. Al-Qaeda cells operatives in the U.S. Security experts concerned about attacks on the power grid. The vulnerability grid is delivered attack with bombs, cyber assault, terrorists, and enemy nations. This is an alternate causality power grid failure. It's already weak, so they're going to target it. Now on the K. So, first up, the link is the idea that we need to consume more energy in order to solve our problems. They are not addressing the underlying thing that we are criticizing, which is that consuming more is going to solve the issues, and that global warming needs to be stopped by solar energy. It's more about an idea of sufficiency. And on case solves, This is the link that undermines permutation, the idea that the app is sufficient to solve its advantages and critique impact short-circuits the alternative models because given the affirmative arguments, they are unnecessary. The affirmative makes two sets of arguments against critiques that challenge the policy-making paradigm. The first one is that the plan is key to solve extinction, and the second one is that policy and role-playing are good for many reasons, i.e. democracy, deliberation, good politics. The extinction-based arguments create a tension that is irresolvable in favor of the affirmative because if extinction is true, assuming they don't win on fairness, then immediate action in the form of the plan is necessary and sufficient to stop a very near-term extinction scenario because all the other stuff is irrelevant. If Broader thinks an extinction is not true, then they lose because they haven't done policymaking. Either extinction is true and they can't solve it, or they haven't been doing something that they need to do and can't resolve it. In a try or die world, there's no answer that favors the affirmative because by the time we access the benefits of policymaking, then we'd all be dead because of the app argument. We need to have a separate reason for doing policymaking, which the alternative provides. We need to look at other forms of life, to look at a model of sufficiency instead of a model of producing more and solving our problems through that. We need to be if their claims are false about the plan being necessary to prevent extinction, then on their own logic, the learning to articulate arguments, making decisions, persuading people, then they should lose because they've presented and consistently advocated a falsity. And they say that we need to act through the government to focus on sustainable development, but you can extend our sequencing argument off of the alternative, which says that we first need to look at the goals of the government and the overarching idea of forms of life. The government automatically assumes that we're looking to maximize utility and production, but that is false. We need to look at a principle of sufficiency, just making enough, not making as much as we can, and a focus on sustainable development sets aside the root cause consumption, Prince in '02. It is no surprise that comforting terms like sustainable development have come from the frame of dominant environmental discourse in North America. Those who developed the term define sustainable practices acting to meet the needs of current population that envy the prospects of livelihoods of future generations just because it the need of today's people remains squared on focus, even usefully ambiguous. Everyone has become adept at talking about sustainability without having to wade into treacherous waters of consumption. Much sustainable development talk steers clear of escalating consumption levels and especially roots of such escalation. They're saying that we need to consume in a more sustainable way, but that just falls back into the trap of that saying that we need to consume. And skip the next card on the alternative. Sufficiency will spill over its logical existence in the real world. It is effective modeling itself in current ecological crisis Prince in '05. Sufficiency predictable is something close to is likely to emerge in the coming decades because it meets the three conditions. One is people very much enacting sufficiency principle. The second condition that enables the adoption of sufficiency that the principle in practice terribly locally young children react to story embodying for state. Despite they say, of course, sufficiency is the least sensible is the logic of prevailing contemporary policy making. Unlike those logics, though it is well tuned to define characteristics of global ecological crisis. Sufficiency is commensurate with biophysical conditions. Long-term security sufficiency goes straight to the absence of frontiers and the possibility of ever-increasing human thought. In place, sufficiency does exist. The logical albeit still supported in other organizing principles like efficiency when condition change, though with larger environment that can no longer accommodate endless expansion through willing experimentation that will, like males, take place is not just possible, it's extremely likely. And on the perm, you can group both perm, do both, and perm do not all exclusive parts. The perm fails public policy assumes demand to be unknowable, shutting challenges and marginalizing the alternative Prince in '02. How many ordinary people living in a high consumption society begin to clarify and act on these uncertainly intuition working they turn certainly not the policy making rid of their own process of thought and insistent dominating because perhaps before to force a deeply seated economic reasons politics for the culture process the political strike movement demand is regulated by the box of consumer sovereignty that's analytic policy tensions is directed toward action that is the process of flying consumers with what they desire. They already assume that the end is to create more. We need to look into different forms of life so that we can have a different governmental outlook. This is like saying we're doing both, but we're already deciding what the outcome is going to be. What the alternative does is it changes the idea of what production is and what we need production for, and sets different goals. So if we do both the plan and the alternative, that means that the alternative is automatically going to fail, and you can extend through the impact that we have a finite supply and that we are going to cause a global collapse if we keep consuming in the way that we do and we don't look to principles of sufficiency and alternate forms of life. And on Park, focusing on environmental effects denies human causes, undermining sustainability, Petrelli 12. All ground for the public natural sciences resources, any rationale that the environment is not actually a problem, rather it is human behavior, its avoidance is their ultimate cause. This is a form of mass social institutional denial. People must consume, but they must consume in access for a variety of social cultural reasons. This is exactly what we're criticizing, and the card continues. As recent studies show, denying the origins and complexity of human motivation to consume while focusing on institutional research and public attention on ecological disturbances that exclude human beings is entirely doomed to failure, as the environmental measures of the last 50 years demonstrate. Studies suggest that the only approach to developing an environmentally sustainable global society will involve the development of conservation ethics consistent with our evolutionary motives, which evolutionary psychologists facilitate. This is the reason why we shouldn't act within the state to implement. This is the reason why another reason why the perms fail, because we can't act within the state. We need to reframe and look at alternate forms of life in order to construct an ethic of sustainability that is going to tell us that we don't need to consume more. We need to just consume enough. And on Barnheiser says that the alternative is too slow, but warming isn't going to happen in the near term. We need to instead reframe. Instead reframe what we're looking at. There's no reason why the alternative would not happen before, like, global environmental destruction due to warming. And then the water shortages stuff is just another link into the critique because it talks about how we need to eternally be consuming more.
Okay, let's start with the trade war argument here. This all caused, which evidence from any time recent says that this is going to cause a trade war, or is causing one?
That's the first piece of evidence that we read in the one.
Yeah, your Shimatsu evidence says that they have a monopoly and that people are concerned about it. Where does it say that it's sufficient to cause a trade war?
So the fact that people are concerned about it, all of our evidence like from that talks about how that would be enough to cause a trade war. So we're saying that concern is still happening in the status quo. So either the trade war has been triggered or the trade war doesn't matter.
That's fine. Your natural gas prices, these solves cards. The first one says that the supplies are going to stay high for the next 12 to 18 months. Do you have any evidence that it's sustainable in the long term, i.e. over like 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, sure. So that in general,
which part of your evidence makes that claim that it's sustainable for the long term? Like,
so our second part, the Mueller evidence, talks about how the supply is continually increasing. The more we consume, the more we have.
It's saying the reason the supply is increasing is because demand increases, so they respond with more supply.
No,
why aren't there spikes when that response hasn't happened yet?
It's not saying that supply is increasing due to demand. It's saying supply is increasing because we're constantly discovering new reserves of natural gas.
It's fine. Your argument on the K is that the sufficiency principle is good. That's how we should approach things. How does the alt get people in general to adopt that principle?
So sure. So we're looking at alternate forms of life, and we're like questioning the underlying assumption that a person is Homo economicus, so they need to.
I understand what the sufficiency principle is. I'm asking what your strategy is to get anyone to adopt that.
Well, we would say that reflecting on the criticism and looking at alternate forms of life would have us conclude.
Which evidence says that people broadly would adopt that principle?
I mean, we're advocating that they do. Right.
So you just assume that this principle gets adopted. You say consumption is. You read this card that says consumption is the root cause of the problems like environmental destruction.
Yeah.
If the plan or the app removes the bad effects of consumption, why is it bad that we don't solve that root cause?
So.
Or more better yet, what bad effects of consumption are still there post-affirmative?
So first off, I would say the affirmative doesn't convert the entire world to solar energy, and it's the underlying ideology that we have this. But second, the impact card out of the case says it's not just about like green tech, it's about the idea that we need to consume more to solve our problems. We consume in excess.
Right,
so even
I
if we're
understand
consuming only solar and
there's
that's
a
not
link. I don't understand why there's an impact if you've conceded solvency that we can diffuse solar to everyone.
So solar is still a form of consumption that is going to be finite
why
in
is
the long
solar
term.
consumption
Solar
bad?
can't solve everything.
It's as much energy as we can get from the sun. Why is there? That's fine. How is water a link to decay? Are you saying that like people should just drink less water?
I'm not saying people should drink less water. I'm saying the idea that there's an energy shortage and we need
Our
to
evidence
produce
that there's
more.
not enough water now and we're necessary to solve it. Why does the K access this at all?
Do you want me to answer that?
No, that's fine.
I just have to flash. Can I have a drink, please? The order is going to be elections and then T with an overview.
It's just the one card.
Yeah. Is everyone ready?
No.
Election's not going for an extent. Obama will win already. Also, our uniqueness evidence says he'll win regardless of anything Romney does or any new actions being. There's not uniqueness for the link turn. Also, the link turns don't apply to the environment, won't spill over to change because the environmentalists are already stable part of Democratic base for Obama. They wouldn't be swing voters. Also, even if China bashes up power, doesn't mean it's able to shift the elections. There's strong political support that's able to influence political opinion. Also, even if the plan saves jobs, not able to enough to save that would be able to change the election. Empirically, the unemployment rate has already gone down, which means jobs should have already. There's already perception of lowering jobs. Also, they're so focused on the economy over environment through a problematic approach. That's why that's indicated as magnifies link. Go to T. First, you have to view the round through convenient interpretation. Debate is a technical game. It must be won by who does it most. A group. Our key framing is limits. First, they do a natural total unlimited of the topic based on the amount of financial incentives and how you're able to view that. That's our Aylward card. It specifically says they're an instrument that can affect any amount of activity. They open the floodgates for anything that can possibly be able to tangentially affect the production of stuff, not incentivize the direct production of stuff independently. They're effectual. That's our Horn evidence. The investment incentive may indirectly affect energy production. They don't have any evidence that says they are direct production incentive, which means within that same thing, you have to hold them to this, and without a stable definition of production incentive, we're not able to get a holistic view of what the topic is based on the framer's intent, which is the main reason to vote out independently. We have a justification for why limits should be preferred first as our smaller, better arguments because the topic, they can see that the topic is bidirectional and already has multiple angles going across, such with the different mechanisms of removing restriction, increase in incentive, as well as the different types of energy and by the different types of advantages, which means there is no fundamental limit. We need to hold to a specific form of limiting within this debate round. Even if they say out of round solves a lot of our offense, it is not enough. We have to hold it to base what on the round is contextual. Also, is said to ground the most wide-ranging negative arguments are premised on production instead based on the direct production, not on tangential. They can just know linked out of their dissets, and this is especially compounded when their AFA's tariffs haven't actually been repealed, that haven't actually been put into place yet. That's our New York Times evidence, and that means they're definitely doing an app that can't even be done for another month, which means they can usually use this to spike out of the majority of our dissets by saying only the perception of the app has been done, not the actual production, which means it's not enough to trigger this. And since he's voted, go to line by line. First, they say they mean by how to extend our definition that restrictions to preclude production means to limit and control. That's our dictionary definitions. Also, extend our grant evidence must be directly on energy production, which means in contact with, not just a tangential going towards restriction based on the solar production. Even if they are able to, even the solar panels are able to be used for the production of energy, there are still ways in the status quo, even with the tariff, that they can still come over to the U.S. and still be able to do power production. Also, they don't need because the production is not. They don't do the distribution of energy. The underlying portion of their evidence talks about how distribution and production is based on direct extraction of fuel and the direct conversion, not just based on a tangential effect. Also, they say the solar panels distribution across the grid. They don't do it because they nowhere as a mandate of the plan do they have installation of solar panels. Only that they lower the tariff means in the status quo the solar panels could still come over even if the USFG pays a little more. And group the violation debate. First, extend our LCOC evidence to regulations that increase the cost are distinct from regulations to prohibit access based on the definition that you have to hold for the in terms of production is based on restricting access. However, there are still ways in which even with a higher cost that the affirmative would be able to still do the production of stuff that means reducing restrictions must be stuff that makes it permanently unavailable. There is still a way in the status quo for which we can get our energy production even if the tariffs are higher. Also, they say for their interpretation however, their model of after kills negron because prefer our specific education. And also, they say limits where they're inherently unpredictable end up as a result of an affirmative that may do it. Also, they say extend our UNCTAD card that the tariff is a fiscal, not a financial incentive. Empirically, that under fiscal incentives is import-based stuff, and that they have to reduce this. Our financials based on just investment and subsidized credits on this. Also, extend our CAM evidence, and they can see our analogy that the plan makes purchase from the solar panels cheaper, which means this would be investment incentives. The investors don't actually have to produce any form of energy. They just have to be able to win based on the mandate thereafter. They're able to do more. To have more solar panels come over to the U.S. and be able for production, and that's a bad model. Also, they say restrictions on production have across the grid. They're not contextual to energy production. This is only in terms of econ default to our definition. Also, they say predictability. However, it's not. They say financial incentive is a transfer. However, this is not contextual at all. It's only based on the economic definition, not energy. Also, it is not mandated the plan that increases any form of electricity production based on the direct conversion of energy of kilowatt hours. It just brings over stuff. Also, they say They say doesn't link to the offer. There's no direct financial set, and there's not able to do more revolution or how they do solar production. Even then, it does not apply to our definition, as they're not based on incentive for energy production. Even then, they have their evidence isolates serious into account as production incentives such as tax credits and production credits that don't apply to their affirmative, which just does based on a mandate of decreasing the tariff towards the U.S. Also, they say group the impact overview. First, crossfire or impact overview specifically says our ground. They say at ground, however, this is irrelevant. They lose a good ground. We lose our dissets, and we spike out empirically is based on the production dissets like fuel price dissets and emission dissets, which are directly linked to the production. Also, they say efficacy isn't bad. However, extend our horn evidence is specifically effectual with topical counties bad. Also, there's a topical version that doing the direct production of new solar panels. Extent can be interpretation is good because it's key to fundamental arbitrary. Doesn't prove the counter interpretation actually good. Independently, we're the only one who provides comparative mode for debate.